So picture this. You've just walked up a really steep, winding cobblestone path, right?
Oh, I can feel my calves burning already.
Right, yeah. And you find yourself in this sun-drenched square of a high mountain village in Sardinia.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and the air smells like, dry earth and wild herbs. And right there, right in the center of the square, is this group of men. And they are intensely, vigorously arguing about a football match.
Like they do.
Exactly. Hands are flying everywhere, voices are raised, and they're passing around glasses of this incredibly dark, tart local wine. Cannonau, I think.
Yeah, Cannonau. It's fantastic.
It's just a scene full of fire, right? Full of life. But here's the kicker. The youngest man in that argument, the absolute youngest one, is 95 years old.
It's just wild. It is the ultimate biological defiance.
Defiance is the perfect word for it.
Because, these individuals are 95 to 98 years old, and they aren't simply surviving. They're not in the state of managed decline that we usually associate with that age.
Yeah, they're practically athletes.
Right. They are completely physically and neurologically robust. They seem entirely unaware of this modern societal assumption that, after the age of 80, the human body is just supposed to become frail or heavily medicalized.
Yeah, that it's just a waiting room, basically. And welcome to the deep dive, everyone, because today, that is exactly what we are unpacking.
We are looking at the so-called Immortality Code.
Exactly. And I know when you first encounter data like this, the immediate skeptical reaction is to assume it's a statistical error.
Oh, for sure. You think maybe birth certificates were forged a century ago to avoid military conscription or something?
Right, the forged passport theory.
Okay.
But demographers and geneticists have been to these regions, these blue zones, like this village in Sardinia or, the islands of Okinawa.
And they've done the work. They have verified the baptismal records, the registries, all the biological markers.
Every single document. So for you listening, we want to make it super clear right up front. The extreme longevity in these pockets of the world is a documented reality.
Yeah.
It is not a myth.
No magic involved.
Zero magic. Our mission for this deep dive is to explain exactly how things like pasta, wine, and sunshine act as literal medicine.
Provided your DNA passport allows for it, of course.
Right, there is that biological constraint, which brings us to the science of it all. Because aging is basically a dialogue, isn't it?
That is exactly what it is, a dialogue. We are stepping completely away from the mystical fountain of youth narratives today.
Leave the crystals at the door.
Yeah, we are looking at the hard endocrinology, the gene expression, the specific biochemical pathways. Because the longevity seen in the blue zones isn't just a passive stroke of luck.
It's an active negotiation.
Yes, an ongoing biochemical negotiation between human DNA and these really specific lifestyle inputs.
Like that tart wine and those steep cobblestone paths.
Right, and the social architecture, which we will definitely get into. All of these things instruct the body to constantly repair itself rather than just, succumb to entropy.
So let's start with the genetic baseline. Because I feel like the dominant cultural narrative around longevity usually revolves around this idea of a golden gene.
Oh, the magic bullet theory.
Yeah. People assume these Sardinian shepherds just won the genetic lottery. They possess some rare mutation that makes them functionally invincible.
And the rest of us are just operating on standard planned obsolescence hardware.
Exactly. But looking through the genetic sequencing data from our sources, it's really clear that extreme longevity is vastly more polygenic than that.
It is deeply polygenic, meaning it's many genes working together.
Right. It's not a single biological bodyguard. It's more like an entire security detail.
Precisely. And while it is this sort of elite club of protector genes, the central node of that network is something called the FOXO3 gene.
FOXO3, the star of the show.
It really is. Basically, it's a transcription factor that essentially acts as the master regulator of human longevity.
Okay, so break that down for us. What is a transcription factor doing in this context?
Sure. So FOXO3 belongs to a family of proteins that regulate the expression of genes involved in cell growth, proliferation, differentiation, and most importantly for us, apoptosis.
Which is programmed cell death. Yeah.
Exactly. It decides what lives, what dies, and what gets repaired.
Right. And in pop science, FOXO3 often gets reduced to this metaphor of a cellular janitor.
I see that one all the time.
Yeah. And it's helpful, but looking at the sources, that metaphor feels wholly inadequate for an audience that actually wants to understand the cellular biology. Because a janitor just sweeps up waste and throws it in the trash.
Right, it's a one-way street.
But when we look at the mechanism of autophagy, which is the process FOXO3 actually initiates, it's not just waste removal.
Not at all.
It's more like a city zoning board, condemning a dilapidated building, breaking down all the concrete and steel, and using those exact same raw materials to construct a state-of-the-art hospital right next door.
I love that. That is a much more accurate representation because to understand why FOXO3 is so critical, we have to look at the metabolic reality of just simply being alive.
Just the cost of doing business as a human.
Exactly. Every time your mitochondria produce ATP for energy, every time you metabolize glucose or, synthesize a new protein, you generate metabolic exhaust.
Like a car engine producing smog.
Basically, yeah. You produce reactive oxygen species and misfolded proteins. And over time, these damaged proteins aggregate. They clump up.
And the cell's natural garbage disposal system just gets overwhelmed.
Yes. The lysosomes, which are the organelles responsible for breaking down waste, they start to become sluggish. The cellular machinery gets clogged up, and that leads to a state of systemic dysfunction.
So how does FOXO3 fix that?
Well, when FOXO3 is activated, it upregulates the transcription of genes that drive macroautophagy. The cell actually builds a double membrane vesicle called an autophagosome around these damaged organelles and misfolded proteins.
It bags up the trash.
It bags it up, fuses it with a lysosome, and enzymatically breaks them down into constituent amino acids and lipids.
Which the cell then utilizes to synthesize entirely new functional components.
Exactly. It's radical intracellular recycling. And for these centenarians, this garbage disposal service works without weekends or strikes.
It is always on the clock. But wait, here is the critical friction point for you listening. And I asked the same question when reading the sources. If I sequence my DNA, right, and I discover, hey, I possess this highly active variant of the FOXO3 gene.
The instinct is to celebrate.
Oh, definitely. You think, excellent, I have the superior recycling plant. I'm practically biologically immortal. So I can afford to just sit on my couch, eat a hypercaloric modern diet, and let my genetic janitor handle the mess.
Yeah, you just assume your genes will outwork your lifestyle.
Right. But the data absolutely destroys that assumption, doesn't it?
It completely destroys it. Because there is a massive biological catch. FOXO3 is highly sensitive to nutrient-sensing pathways, specifically the mTOR pathway and AMPK.
Okay, let's unpack those because they are crucial.
Right. FOXO3 does not operate in a vacuum. It requires an environmental trigger to activate. It needs to feel mild stress.
Mild stress. Not a car crash, but mild stress.
Exactly. If you are sitting on a couch in a climate-controlled room, constantly grazing on high glycemic carbohydrates and animal proteins, your body is in a constant state of nutrient abundance.
You're never hungry. You're never cold.
Right. And in that state, the mTOR pathway is perpetually activated. And mTOR essentially signals to the cell, hey, resources are everywhere. Focus on growth and proliferation. Don't worry about cleaning up right now.
It's party time, basically.
Yeah, and when mTOR is high, autophagy is actively suppressed. The FOXO3 gene essentially just goes to sleep.
Oh, wow. So by existing in the standard modern environment of constant caloric surplus and physical comfort, we are chemically silencing our own anti-aging hardware.
That is exactly what is happening. We are telling the genetic recycling plant to shut down. The genetic code is there, your passport is stamped, but the epigenetic signal is entirely wrong.
So the janitor's taking a nap in the closet because you ate a donut.
Pretty much. Now, superimpose that biological reality onto the geography of that Sardinian mountain village we talked about.
Like the cobblestones.
The environment there is not a luxury spa. It is basically an open-air gym characterized by constant, unavoidable vertical movement.
You can't even go get milk without doing a stair climber workout.
Exactly. Just visiting a neighbor or tending to a flock requires a massive cardiovascular effort. The steep slopes, the pastures, it forces their genes to work at maximum capacity.
But wait, I have a question about this. There is a biological paradox here that we need to address.
Okay, let's hear it.
We know that heavy, sustained cardiovascular output increases oxidative stress, right? It increases cellular division.
Yes, it does.
So if these centenarians are constantly hiking up mountains, aren't they generating massive amounts of reactive oxygen species, like all that metabolic smog you mentioned earlier?
They absolutely are.
So how does the body balance the good stress of the physical exertion against the bad stress of that metabolic exhaust? Like, why doesn't that rigorous lifestyle just age them faster?
That is a brilliant question. And it brings us to one of the most elegant concepts in all of longevity science, which is hormesis.
Hormesis.
Yes. Hormesis is a biological response to low or moderate exposures to stress. And what it does is it actually triggers a compensatory defense mechanism that makes the organism stronger.
What doesn't kill you makes you functionally younger.
Exactly. So when those Sardinian shepherds are climbing steep slopes, yes, they are generating reactive oxygen species. But the body senses that transient increase in oxidative stress and, more importantly, that temporary depletion of intracellular energy.
Because they're burning calories fast.
Right. Specifically, there's a rise in the AMP to ATP ratio, and that energy deficit activates an enzyme called AMPK.
Okay, and AMPK is essentially the cellular fuel gauge, right?
Correct. So when AMPK detects that energy is running critically low, it actively inhibits mTOR.
It shuts down the party.
It shuts down the party, and it signals FOXO3 to head straight to the nucleus and start transcribing those autophagy genes.
Oh, that is incredible.
So the acute temporary stress of the mountain climb triggers a disproportionately large anti-aging defense response. By the time they sit down to rest in the village square to argue about football, their cells are aggressively clearing out damaged proteins.
The janitor's working overtime.
Yes, and they're upregulating antioxidant enzymes to neutralize those reactive oxygen species you were worried about.
Wow. So the modern individual lacking that physical stress never triggers the defense response in the first place.
Exactly. We just allow the oxidative damage to quietly accumulate.
That reframes exercise completely.
Yeah.
Because I think we usually view a workout as just a way to burn calories or build muscle.
A very cosmetic view.
Yeah. But in the context of the blue zones, movement against gravity is the precise molecular key required to unlock the genetic instructions for cellular repair.
It is an absolute requirement.
But okay, so physical movement triggers genetic cleaning. But I'm wondering out loud here, is the physical environment the only factor?
Not even close.
Because the sources highlight that cleaning the inside of the cell is really only half the equation. The other half is protecting the structural integrity of the genetic blueprints themselves.
Right. The mental environment is huge.
So assuming you, the listener, understand the basic anatomy of a chromosome, let's look at the mechanisms of telomere degradation. This is fascinating stuff.
Telomeres are critical. So just to define them, telomeres are these repetitive nucleotide sequences right at the very ends of our linear chromosomes.
Like the little plastic tips on the ends of shoelaces, right?
The aglets, yes.
Yeah.
That is the classic metaphor, and it works perfectly. They are protective caps. Now, because of what biologists call the end replication problem, the enzymes that duplicate our DNA cannot copy it all the way to the very end of the strand.
So it falls a little bit short every time.
Every single time. Consequently, with every single cell division, a small portion of that protective telomeric sequence is lost. The cap gets shorter.
And the biological rule here is absolute, isn't it?
It is. When the telomeres reach a critically short length, the cap disappears, and the cell interprets this as severe DNA damage.
It triggers the DNA damage response.
Yeah.
The DDR.
Exactly. The cell panics. And rather than continuing to divide and risking a malignant mutation like cancer, the cell permanently arrests its cell cycle.
It just stops.
It enters a state known as cellular senescence. It stops functioning optimally, but it doesn't actually die. Instead, it becomes what researchers often refer to as a zombie cell.
A zombie cell. And these senescent cells aren't just benignly taking up space in your tissue, right? This is where the biological cascade gets really destructive.
Yeah, they are highly toxic.
Because they begin secreting what is known as SSP, the senescence-associated secretory phenotype, which is a mouthful.
It is, but it basically means they start pumping out pro-inflammatory cytokines, chemokines, and proteases that actively degrade the surrounding healthy tissue.
So one senescent cell can essentially infect its healthy neighbors, turning them into zombies as well.
That's the perfect way to visualize it. It's a chain reaction of inflammation. So the rate at which your telomeres shorten directly dictates how quickly your tissues become overwhelmed by localized chronic inflammation.
Which brings us to the ultimate enemy here.
Yeah.
Because I noticed a fascinating detail from the sources. We talked about cellular division shrinking telomeres.
Right.
But the sources point out that psychological stress actually eats telomeres even faster than a bad diet does.
It is the primary accelerant. The data shows massive variations in telomere length among people of the exact same chronological age. And the differentiator is often chronic psychological stress.
Specifically, the stress hormone, cortisol. Cortisol is just the ultimate enemy of the telomere.
It really is. It's the chronic activation of the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and that subsequent flood of cortisol.
Okay, let's track that mechanism for the listener.
Yeah.
Because it's wild to think about. How does an abstract psychological concept like, worrying about an email from your boss or stressing over a mortgage payment, how does that cross the blood-brain barrier to physically degrade the DNA inside a white blood cell?
It is a remarkable pathway. It all begins with neuroception. When the brain perceives a threat, and you have to remember, to the primal human brain, social and financial threats are indistinguishable from a physical predator.
Your brain thinks an angry email is a tiger.
Exactly. So the amygdala signals the hypothalamus to release corticotropin-releasing hormone.
CRH.
Right. This triggers the pituitary gland, which ultimately commands the adrenal glands to release cortisol and adrenaline into the bloodstream.
And in an acute scenario, like running from that tiger, this is life-saving.
Absolutely. It mobilizes glucose, it prepares the muscles for action, but when that stress is chronic, when the tiger is just your daily commute in your inbox, the continuous presence of high cortisol levels actively suppresses the production and activity of an enzyme called telomerase.
Wait, telomerase, that's the enzyme that can actually add base pairs back onto the ends of the telomeres?
Right.
Effectively lengthening them or slowing their degradation?
Exactly. Telomerase is your chromosomal maintenance crew, and cortisol fires the whole crew.
Oh, wow. So you're losing the caps and you can't rebuild them.
Furthermore, chronic cortisol exposure massively upregulates systemic oxidative stress. So those reactive oxygen species we discussed earlier, they preferentially attack the guanine-rich sequences of telomeric DNA,
So they're physically attacking the shoelace tips.
causing single-strand breaks that accelerate the shortening process completely independent of cell division. You are literally eroding your chromosomal stability through chronic psychological vigilance.
That is terrifying. And it creates a stark contrast with the cultural rhythms of places like Okinawa and Sardinia.
Night and day difference.
Because in those places, there's absolutely no cult of rushing. Whereas modern hustle culture, where chronic urgency is worn as a badge of honor and your time is monetized down to the minute.
It is essentially a masterclass in accelerated telomere degradation.
So let's look at the counterexample provided in the sources. The classic 3-hour Italian lunch.
The best kind of lunch.
I have to play devil's advocate here. Because if you are listening to this while commuting to a high-pressure 9-to-5 job, telling you to adopt a 3-hour midday feast is practically insulting.
The friction there is immense, I know.
Doesn't a 3-hour lunch just mean people are avoiding their responsibilities? What is the actual biological utility of that ritual?
It's so easy to look at a long, relaxed lunch through the lens of modern productivity metrics and just dismiss it as laziness. But functionally, biologically, it is a highly sophisticated intervention. It's a sacred ritual.
A sacred ritual that actively lowers cortisol level.
Exactly. We have to look at the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the primary neural superhighway of the parasympathetic nervous system.
The rest and digest state.
Yes. So when you sit down for a protracted meal with people you deeply trust, your nervous system is absorbing a multitude of safety cues. The relaxed facial expressions of your family, the prosody and cadence of their voices, the lack of digital distraction.
Nobody's looking at their phones.
Right. All of these things heavily stimulate vagal tone.
So the vagus nerve detects this psychological safety and sends a signal back up to the brainstem to actively shut down the HPA axis.
Yes. The vagal stimulation acts as a physiological brake on the stress response. Cortisol production plummets, heart rate variability increases. Blood is diverted away from the skeletal muscles and back toward the gastrointestinal tract, which optimizes nutrient absorption.
The biochemistry of peace.
The biochemistry of peace, exactly. You are creating a biochemical environment where oxidative stress drops, telomerase activity can resume, and that DNA damage response is mitigated.
So eating a sandwich at your desk while rapidly answering emails ensures that your digestion is compromised and your cortisol remains elevated.
You're just rusting from the inside out.
But eating in a state of deep social connection is quite literally structural armor for your DNA. When you are relaxed and surrounded by family, your chromosomes physically remain long for a greater period.
That's the science of it. Relaxation is not merely rest. It is a biological intervention that extends life at the cellular level.
That completely flips the script on how we view relaxation. We are so conditioned to view rest as just a reward for productivity.
Or a weakness.
Yeah.
Well.
But in the Blue Zone context, relaxation is an active, aggressive therapeutic intervention. So the microdose version for the listener isn't necessarily quitting their job to drink Cannon out for 3 hours every afternoon.
Though that sounds nice.
It does. But practically, it's about creating rigid, protected boundaries around periods of psychological safety, however brief they are.
Right. Putting the phone in another room during dinner to allow the vagus nerve to actually register the presence of a safe social environment.
Because the environment dictates the internal chemical state, which dictates the rate of cellular aging.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered the physical environment with FOXO3 and movement. And we've covered the mental environment with telomeres and stress. But all of this longevity begs a much deeper question. What is the point of living to 100 if you have nothing to live for?
The philosophical component, which is actually biological.
Right. There's a stark contrast here with modern Western medicine. We treat aging almost entirely as a physiological decline, and we completely ignore the social infrastructure around the patient.
We prescribe statins and metformin, but we completely isolate the elderly.
We view them as a burden, as a loss of utility. We place them in care facilities away from the main flow of life. But in the blue zones, loneliness is practically non-existent.
An elderly person is never marginalized. Never.
They are the center of the family, the wise sage. The social integration of the elderly isn't just some quaint cultural tradition. It is a profound immunological shield.
It is the bedrock of their longevity. They possess what the Okinawans call Ikigai.
Ikigai, the rough translation being the fundamental reason you wake up in the morning.
Right. Your purpose, your meaning. The specific role you play that makes you necessary to the community.
It sounds like this beautiful poetic philosophy, but the sources link this directly to hard genetics and biology. How does this subjective philosophical feeling of having a purpose translate into an altered immune response?
This is where the intersection of sociology and biology becomes truly fascinating. We can look at this through the lens of something called CTRA.
CTRA?
Yes, the conserved transcriptional response to adversity. Evolutionary biologists understand that for early humans, social isolation was basically a death sentence.
If you were kicked out of the tribe, you were done.
Right. To be separated from the group meant you were highly vulnerable to physical trauma from a predator or bacterial infection from a hostile environment. Therefore, when the human brain perceives loneliness or a lack of social utility, it naturally anticipates physical wounding.
Wow. It anticipates getting hurt. So it initiates a preemptive immune shift.
Exactly. When you feel chronically lonely or useless, your brain triggers the CTRA. This genetic program massively upregulates the expression of pro-inflammatory genes, specifically cytokines like IL-6 and TNF-alpha.
To prepare for a bacterial infection from a wound that hasn't even happened yet.
Precisely, and simultaneously it downregulates the genes responsible for antiviral responses and antibody production.
Wait, why does it downregulate antiviral defenses?
Because viral transmission requires close proximity to other humans, which a lonely person lacks. So the body shifts resources away from viral defense and dumps everything into inflammatory antibacterial defense.
That is a staggering realization. The biology of our immune system is literally eavesdropping on our social lives.
Always listening.
If you feel isolated, your body is bathed in systemic inflammation, preparing for a predator attack that is never going to come. And that chronic inflammation, as we know from the telomere discussion, accelerates the senescence of cells and the degradation of tissues.
It's what geriatricians refer to as inflammaging.
Inflammaging. I read in the sources, research by scientists like Julianne Holt-Lundstad has shown that chronic loneliness is biologically equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day in terms of mortality risk.
It is incredibly destructive. But conversely, when you possess a strong sense of Ikigai and you are deeply embedded in a community, the brain registers profound safety.
The level of oxytocin, right?
Yeah.
The hormone of attachment.
Yes. The presence of strong social bonds triggers the release of oxytocin from the posterior pituitary. And oxytocin doesn't just mediate emotional attachment. It has direct, potent physiological effects. It is directly linked to how quickly our bodies age.
So how does it actually alter the immune response?
Oxytocin binds to receptors on immune cells and actively suppresses the production of those inflammatory cytokines, like IL-6. It shifts the immune system completely away from that damaging CTRA profile.
So you're saying that simply feeling needed is a form of biohacking?
It is the ultimate biohack.
The brain is essentially sending a literal chemical signal to the immune system that says, hey, we are deeply embedded in the tribe. We are loved here. We are necessary for the survival of the group.
It is too early to leave.
It is too early to leave. Optimize for long-term maintenance rather than short-term emergency defense.
That is the exact mechanism. It provides profound biological protection against aging, it lowers baseline inflammation, it enhances natural killer cell activity, and it optimizes the body's repair protocols. The cellular biology is essentially reflecting the sociological reality.
That is incredible. So let's pull all of these systemic threads together for you, the listener, because we've moved far past the superficial concept of a magical geographical zone.
We went deep into the machinery.
We really did. We've looked at how mechanical stress and energy depletion trigger AMPK to wake up the FOXO3 gene, acting as a cellular janitor and initiating intracellular recycling.
Right.
We've examined how vagal tone and parasympathetic dominance protect the telomeric sequences at the ends of your chromosomes by suppressing cortisol.
Protecting the blueprints.
And we've explored how the sociological reality of Ikigai physically alters your gene transcription, downregulating the systemic inflammation associated with social isolation.
The biochemistry of peace and action.
So the grand unifying theory here is that your personal blue zone is not a geographical dot on a map. Like, you don't need to move to Sardinia or Okinawa.
No, absolutely not. It is a highly specific local environment that you must actively engineer for yourself by understanding your own unique genetic instructions.
It is about engineering friction, right? Building mechanical physical friction into your daily routine to trigger hormesis.
Yes.
But also removing psychological friction by creating sacred, protected spaces for meals and connection to stimulate the vagus nerve.
Finding balance.
And cultivating a profound sense of purpose so your immune system receives the chemical directive to maintain the vessel.
And if you want to operationalize all this data, the sources point to some exceptionally rigorous, actionable material for you to use.
Oh, absolutely.
The first is a comprehensive long read we've linked. It's titled The Longevity Code. It bypasses all the pop science summaries and details the specific protocols. It covers everything from FOXO3 tips to finding your Ikigai.
Yeah, it has a really robust section on the psychological frameworks required to audit your own life for purpose, which is far more complex than simply picking up a hobby.
Definitely. Additionally, in the hub, you will find the updated centenarian checklist.
That checklist is amazing.
It's a fantastic tool. It isn't a superficial quiz. It is a systemic audit tool designed to help you start fresh with full knowledge of your genetic code. It helps you analyze your current lifestyle inputs against the validated biochemical principles of the blue zones we just discussed.
It really allows you to systematically adjust your daily environment to optimize your gene expression. Knowing the mechanisms strips away the mystery. It transfers the power of aging from a passive, inevitable decline into a manageable, active dialogue.
You are in control of the conversation.
Exactly. But before we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, slightly provocative thought to ponder, based on the transcriptomic data we discussed regarding isolation and the immune system.
I know where you're going with this, and it is a thought that directly challenges our entire modern technological paradigm.
Right. We just established that our cells literally listen to our social connections.
Yeah.
They listen to the depth and authenticity of our bonds to determine whether to upregulate systemic inflammation or to stop fighting and engage in long-term cellular repair.
They are exquisitely sensitive to loneliness.
Right. So given that biological reality, how might the modern epidemic of digital isolation be silently rewriting our genetic timelines?
Completely independent of how well we eat or exercise.
Exactly. We possess thousands of superficial algorithmic connections online, but we are functionally starved of the oxytocin-producing physical presence of a tribe.
The body doesn't register a follower count as safety?
No. Are we inadvertently sending our cells the biological signal to shut down and prepare for death simply because our primal brains cannot register a text message as genuine tribal safety?
It is a chilling question. It really reveals the true cost of our technological convenience.
It does. So consider the actual biological weight of your environment the next time you choose digital, skrilling over a tangible physical conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of longevity. Remember to live long, love your genes, and enjoy every moment. We will see you next time.